In conversation with Joseph Lewis. After 49 years in education, Joseph Lewis has retired as a teacher, coach, counselor, and administrator. He is an award-winning author and uses his psychology and counseling background to craft thriller, crime, detective mysteries with a strong coming-of-age theme embedded within. Born and raised in Wisconsin in a musical family of 10, he has been on stage singing and acting since fourth grade. In his profession as a principal, he opted each year to sing a song to his graduating seniors in place of a commencement address. Years later, kids and parents would recall how much their song meant to them. Lewis now resides in Virginia with his wife, Kim. Together, they have three wonderful children, Will, the 6th, 2014, Anna, and Emily, and one grandson, Mason. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to offer the show today, Joseph Lewis. How are you doing today, Joseph?
Just fine, thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing, really, that we are here after a long one to have and sit down and have a conversation around your works again. Quite lovely we are here. Thank you so much for joining again.
I was looking forward to this. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, really. My pleasure. So, Joseph, I need to first say that I did find the description, the synopsis of Black He, the Evil One, in Amazon to be quite pulling, quite amazing, and quite lovely to me. And I would like us to start today's conversation by you telling the audience, telling us what actually inspired you to write this book, how you come up with a title because I find it to be a quite striking one, even. But if you can run us through the foundation, the making, the time you realized that you needed to tell a story, and it has to be the one embedded in Black Yi, just run us through the making of the book. That'll be great.
I finished a book called Caught in a Web back in 2018. It was Best Thrillers called it one of the best crime fiction books of the year of
Wow.
2018. It won a Pencraft Literary Award winner, things like that. At
Mm.
the end of the book, um, law enforcement fabricated a tale that would keep four individuals safe.
Wow.
The tale was how four members of MS-13, which is a very violent, ruthless gang,
Yeah.
how they died in this small suburban home in Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Mm.
This tale, this fabrication was supposed to keep four individuals safe.
Uh,
Unfortunately, somebody talked, the information got out, and now in Black Yee, MS-13 is back in town looking for answers. Yee is a Navajo Indian spiritual deity, and like the Catholics, they have many different saints.
mm.
In the Navajo lore and culture, spirituality, they have many different Yi. However, there is one they don't even mention by name, and they don't even like to talk about because they feel it would invite evil into their lives, into their loved ones. And that's the story behind Black Yi, my current
Wow.
book.
Wow. That sounds to me to be quite great. Sounds to me to be quite amazing, really. I love your description of that, the telling into it. And thank you so much for running us through the making of that. Now, Joseph, you also
Mhm.
have the novel touches on Navajo mythology and spirituality through George Tolkien. I wanted to ask you, how did you approach incorporating indigenous element respectfully and meaningfully in the book?
Thank you. Um, my Navajo character of George actually appeared in my very first book, Taking Lives. It was the prequel to the Lives trilogy. And I was
Wow.
always fascinated with the Navajo culture, their spirituality, their beliefs.
Mm,
Introduced to that world by another author by the name of Tony Hillerman, who is now deceased. His daughter has continued writing his stories, but they all center on the Navajo Nation reservation in southeastern United States and Arizona.
Mm,
And I just liked that flavor. And so I just carried George and my other characters all the way through all 10 books. I
mm,
received an awful lot of help from Shane Brown and his father, who I guess it's weekly. They do a podcast on Navajo culture, Navajo beliefs, and things like that. I've
mm.
reached out to the Navajo Nation Reservation Museum. They've helped me. And then a wonderful lady by the name of Brenda Hatt, who's Navajo, helped me with dialogue, helped me with beliefs, helped me with Navajo words and things like that, because I wanted to make my writing as authentic and real as
Mm,
possible. And so
mm.
that's kind of how I went about it.
Wow, that's an amazing one, really. And from your answer to that, I would like you to run us through some of the supposed themes, storyline, the background, and the subject lines that the would-be reader would experience picking up Yihi. And I know you have, your picture in the background over there, which looks quite beautiful, really. But if you do have a copy of the book, I'd like you to raise to the camera just so it's what it looks like. But then I can see you have one in the background there, which is
Mhm.
lovely.
Thank you. My publisher has a design crew headed by David King, and he's the guy who came up with the concept for the book cover.
Oh.
And all I did was give him a couple of ideas, and he's the one who came up with that concept. And there's no way I could top it. To me, it answers that question. Um, in this book, I had to create someone that would fit Black Yee. And
Mm,
I started out actually with two other characters in mind that would embody this belief, this Black Yee.
mm,
And I settled on, while they were evil, I settled on a guy by the name of Landon Kearns, who is sociopath. He has no feeling. He is cold. Um, he does not believe in right or wrong. Doesn't know the difference between right or wrong. So that's who embodies the spirit of Black Yi in my
mm.
book.
Wow, that must have been a lot, really. I love your take on that, really. Quite beautiful and quite awesome. And also, Joseph, one of the things that I find to be quite amazing in this writing in this novel is the fact that you do not shy away from showing us the psychological trauma and moral ambiguity. Now, I wanted to ask you, how do you approach writing characters who are damaged but still deeply human? How?
I think, if you look at your friends, your loved ones, each of us has had what I call baggage. And we don't really know what that baggage is. Sometimes there's a lot of it, sometimes there's a little bit of it. Sometimes it's good stuff that has happened to us.
Mm,
Sometimes it's not so good stuff that has happened to us. And I think that's just human. And so when I create characters, I want my characters to be as real as possible.
mm,
And I really believe that good will always overcome evil. I
yeah.
think that that's a constant theme in all of my writing. And when I write, I don't necessarily think consciously of the theme I'm writing. To me, that comes after it's all done.
Mm,
And it really becomes, I say this, that when I finish a book, it's no longer mine. It becomes the reader's. And the reader, with that point of view, with that perspective,
yeah.
with that perception, and all of the things that the reader brings to the book,
Mm,
they see it for what it is. And my book has been called A Battle Between Good and Evil, has been a coming of age story because my characters, they're adolescents and they are growing, some better, some
yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that themes evolve after it's written. I don't necessarily consciously think about a theme when I'm writing. I
Mm,
write to tell a story,
wow.
and I try to make it as authentic and as appealing as possible.
Mm. Oh, wow, that's an amazing one, really. I love your take on that. Quite beautiful and quite great. And also, given the theme of deception, the theme of justice and redemption, as used as it likes to your book, Do you feel this story resonates with challenges we face in today's society, if in any way?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm,
Especially what's occurring out west in California right now in Los Angeles
mm,
with the National Guard troops in, with the rounding up of immigrants, some of whom are absolutely um, innocent of any crime. The
mm,
things that are taking place right now, I think it speaks to the current events of our life right now, not
yeah,
just in the United States, but elsewhere as wherever there's conflict. I
yeah.
think my book will resonate.
Oh, wow. I love your take on that. Thank you. Thank you for giving an answer regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And also, Joseph, your book blends crime with thriller and cultural narrative. How do you balance those genres so they feel cohesive and natural? And also, were there a particular scene that was especially difficult or rewarding for you to write? I'm just curious.
Nothing was really difficult for me to write once I did the research on the Navajo culture and their spiritual life.
Mm,
Then the difficulty was removed. When I sit down, there are some writers who say they fear the blank page because they don't exactly know what to write and when to
yeah,
write it, and things like that.
yeah.
I kind of approach the blank page as a challenge,
Mm,
and I really like it. I like to be able to face that blank page and write. I always have an idea of what I'm going to write before I sit down at the keyboard, and
mm,
then sometimes my characters just kind of take off, and I end up with something a little bit different, and
mm.
that's okay too because that tells me that the book is coming alive,
Yeah,
that the characters seem to be real to
yeah.
whoever happens to be reading it. But in terms of the crime, and it is there's some difficult paragraphs and difficult stories between the covers of Black Yi.
Mm,
I basically lean on that good will overcome evil,
mm,
and I lean on what's happening in modern day in real life with struggles people have, those elements, seeing that they are challenged and
mm.
that we take care of the people that are around us and in our lives.
Wow, that's an amazing one, really. Yeah, I must say that I love your take on that, really. Quite beautiful and quite awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And now I want us to diversify a little bit into the topics of readers' feedback. Because one of the things that amazes me most as a writer is to sit back, fold my hands, grab a cup of coffee, and listen to readers' feedbacks. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex in its entirety is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinion. Somebody can read this and said, "Oh, okay, I could get that." And somebody else could read it and said, "Oh, what is he trying to communicate in there?" Some people might get a message intended by the author. Some might be close to getting the message. Some might be far from getting the message. Some might even hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. You know, as intrinsically fun as they sound, I would like to ask you to know your opinion about this. How do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
I think it goes back to what I said a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
when that each person, each reader who picks up any book will bring to that reading bits and pieces of what has occurred in their own lives.
Mm,
And I think they will take out of it what they will. And the writer, the author, has no control over that, nor should we.
yeah.
Because if I sit down to write and thinking about, well, making sure Peter's going to love it or Jane is going to love it,
Yeah.
the book is going to fall flat. I have to write a story that's going to be true to me. And
Mm,
and I don't know who said it. I think it's Stephen King said that if there are no tears in the writer, there's no tears in the reader. And I think that's very accurate. The,
yeah.
the feelings that when I write it, I'm feeling along with the characters. I'm seeing
Mm,
it. And I wept at a time or two within the book, within all of my books, actually. And I think people will see that and feel that.
mm,
Um, if they don't feel, then the writing is flat. I failed as an author. I think in any book you pick up, whether it's me, whether it's David Baldacci or James Patterson or some of the other authors that you've had on your show,
yeah.
if they don't, if they're not moved by the words and the phrases and the paragraphs that we chose, the
Mm,
stories that we illustrate, then I think we failed as authors. I
mm,
think that's very important that feeling is generated in any
mm,
book that you read. And if
mm.
not, quit reading it. And I think that's really important because an ebook might cost $6.99. And if you're not capturing the reader within the first couple of pages, it's very easy for the reader to put down that book and never pick it up again. And
Mm,
so I try to each chapter tell a story and move that story further along towards the ending. And I try to capture something that's important, whether it be action,
mm,
whether it be emotion, whether it be a character that's growing or not.
mm,
Every chapter it moves that story along, and so that's what I try to do when I write. I don't
mm.
necessarily. I'm not conscious of how long the sentences are or how long the paragraphs are, as long as it is meaningful, as
Yeah,
long as it's telling the story. I think
yeah,
that's the most important part.
absolutely. Oh, wow. I love your answer to that, really. It sounds to me to be quite amazing and quite awesome. Thank you so much for
You
sharing.
bet.
And I love what you said about, I love that quote. If the tease is not there in the writer, you can feel it from the reader. You need to feel the
Yeah.
feeling. The feeling needs to be vivid, coming from the writer, first of all, before the reader can be able to feel it. The reader tends to feel what you felt as an author while writing the book. You understand? So there has
Right.
to be the
Absolutely.
amazing, lovely balance in it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that you also mentioned that the word, the kind of choice of word that you use must be captivating enough to carry on the feeling that you want to leave your readers with, which I think it's very important, especially in storytelling. Very important.
Yes.
Very important.
You
Oh,
bet. And I think that's why some books are picked up again and again. I've reread several books because
mm,
each time I read it, I pick up something else.
something
And I think
new.
that's the mark of a good book, if you're willing to pick
Absolutely.
it up again and not just toss it in the used pile.
I love that. That's one of the conversation that we have on the internet. That what are the features? What are the qualities that makes a good book? And you see people leaving a lot of comment of what they think makes a good book in their own perception. And you read into some of the things people are saying, you find it to be quite interesting and quite amazing, especially when it's coming from readers. Like, I was like, oh, that's amazing. Okay, that's really amazing. So yeah, I love your take on that. Very important and quite educative as well. Yeah, very educative, quite
Thank you.
informative. Thank you. Thank you. Now, apart from the book we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on? Can you briefly tell us about your other books as well?
I have 10 books actually that I've written. One of the more meaningful books that I think I've written was a book called Fan Mail. And
Mm.
that was the book just previous to Black Yi. And that also won, that was a Maxie Award finalist. Um, and the story behind that is there are a couple of guys in my fictional family that are in a band, and it become quite popular. And what
Mm.
happened is there's this fan who is ignored, and the fan becomes a stalker, and the stalker becomes a little bit more deadly. But what the
Wow.
book does is it actually tells the story of each of my fictional characters in the
Mm.
Evans family, how
Mm.
they came to be. And the tension in the book almost threatens to pull this family apart. But there's one
Wow.
16-year-old boy that feels that family is too important. So he puts his life on the line, literally, to
Hmm.
save his family. And that's really the story. And I think if people come away from reading that book or any of my books, including Black Yi,
Yeah.
that family and familial love is important. One of my reviewers for Black Yi wrote that it's a balance. It's a you have gang affiliation and
Hmm.
the need to be in a gang versus familial love, protection, and companionship. And they're at odds and they conflict in this book. And I think where there's conflict, there's a story. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important when you're reading to find the conflict, or
Hmm.
as the writer, to write the conflict so that the author, I mean, the reader is intrigued and interested in that particular book. And I
Wow.
try to do that in each of my books, but Fan Mail was pretty special to me in that it tells the story of my fictional family. And I just carry that forward in Black Yi Yi.
Wow. That's an amazing style you've incorporated in that. Quite beautiful and quite wholesome. And to know that you've got 10 books already written, that's a lot, really. That's a lot. That's quite commendable. I hope you find some time to sleep.
Yeah. What I do is I average about a book a year. I tell people it's like giving birth, although I've not had that pleasure. But from idea to publication, it takes about a year. And I'm
Wow.
averaging about one book a year.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot of work you get on going, really. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Well done. That's a great one. That's a great one. Now, I'd like to ask you, what sort of advice would you give other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book? What advice would you give people or someone in this category? And also, where can interested viewers get a copy of your books from?
Thank you for asking that. I think the advice I would give to any writer is to read as much as possible.
Mm,
Because if the writer doesn't read, you're missing out on valuable tools for the toolbox. And I
mm,
think that's very important. Not only to read in the genre that you're writing,
yeah.
but read about anything in any genre because you're going to pick
Mm,
up something from someone. You're going to
yeah.
pick up a tool, way they turn a phrase, things like that. So read as much as possible. And don't ever be afraid of the blank page.
Mm,
Write. And it should be done every single day. My method is to read what I wrote the night before. And then that does two things for me. It gives me a chance to do some simple edits. I might change action. I might change what character does or says, something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's really important is it puts my mind in the place, the setting, the character of what I'm about to write next. That's
Mm,
I think that's something that any writer can take and use for their own writing.
right.
You can find my books on Amazon. If they Google Joseph Lewis, there I think there's two of us out there. One guy's dead. It's not me. I'm alive. Um, but it's 10 books. My publisher is Black Rose Writing. You can contact them. My books, for many of them, most of them are in audio, Kindle, and paperback. Black EE is currently being made into audiobook, so that'll be
Mm.
available for people too.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Joseph Lewis' Black Yi and other books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles and also on his website and also on other platforms. I also left links to his social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Joseph, for accepting the invitation to come up on the show again to talk about Blackie E and your bodies of amazing literature work. Thank you very much for coming on. This was really impressive.
I appreciate you having me. I always look forward to being interviewed because I love talking about writing, and your show is one that I look forward to doing. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure, really. Thank you.